So what we're looking to do today is I want to have a look through the new Isolytic Damage now that we've all got that favour that's going to do something to it.
Yes, it's any situation as long as you're
On the
on
right
the
ship.
specific ship and you have
The right ship.
the effect active.
Marvellous. So, what I'm
That'd
talking
be
about...
morale for explorers, burning
Yeah,
for
breach
battleship,
and
hull
breach
breach
for
for interceptors.
spot on. I have got the Blade of Tukon. A Stewpot fixed the battle log tool, yet he has indeed. He has indeed. And we are going to show it off tonight. So we got this artifact. This was done by completing an event a while back, a couple of days ago when it finished, for collecting battle pass points and completing other events. I'm not sure it's coming around. Well, it's not coming around again for the rest of the arc. So if you have missed it, sadly you have missed it. But it gave away a free unlock of one of the new Isolytic Damage artifacts, which is quite good. So the one I did, I went for this. And the reason that I went for it was because, as Silver's just said, there are 3 types of these, 3 main ones, and they're virtually they're similar. They're exactly the same in terms of bonuses, exactly the same in terms of bonuses, but they apply in different scenarios. So the Blade of Tukon increases damage, Isolytic damage, while on an interceptor, and the opponent has hull breach. And then there is one that you took that one too, Deathkill. Yeah, I get it. And the reason that I've done it is because I just think hull breach is one of the more common used. I don't tend to use burning on, obviously apart from in PvP, but generally I wouldn't use it. But hull breach is something that I use everywhere for PvP, PvE, just pretty much everything that you do. I'm happy to bring hull breach along, and I do have a decent-ish pylon that I'm still probably going to be using for a fair few levels. So I'm quite happy to. The one that I've chosen, even though I've done my main ship now, technically is a battleship since I went into G5 and got the Vulture. I just decided that hull breach was probably the most usable one of the effects that I'm actually going to use. One of the 3 main ones. Obviously, we had a similar added a while back. Evening, Rocco. Nice to see you, pal. Now then, Justin. So I went for hull breach for that reason. Like I say, I do have a decent interceptor as well. Now, Isolytic Damage, when we was theory crafting it right at the start of the arc, we weren't sure exactly how this was going to play out. We didn't know whether it took 1% of the damage and converted that to Isolytic, or whether it took the standard damage of a shot and then 1% of whatever that total damage was, it added on top that 1% Isolytic. And that second option is what they've done with Isolytic. So if you imagine that you did a 1000 strength shot, to keep the numbers easy, you did a 1000 strength shot, rather than it being taking 1% of that 1000 and then converting it into Isolytic damage, it takes the 1000%. It takes the 1000 damage and it takes 1% of that, which will be 10, and then adds that on top and turns that into Isolytic. So it is an addition to damage. It is not conversion of existing damage.
It is. It's important to note that it's an add-on to your total damage, not like base damage. So, and since there's no pre-existing research or any buffs for Isolytic damage, that 1% is more significant than like 1% of standard damage that you might get from a researcher. Something like that.
Correct. So because there's nothing else that's currently affecting it at the moment, it's really quite pronounced. So if we look at this shot, for example, let's find this one. So my Vulture here, it dealt 6,356,617. That would remain exactly the same. And if we was in the position where we had 1% Isolytic, we would take 1% of this 6,356,617. That would then be added. Richie, come on now. Bloody screaming at me already. It would take a 1% of the 6.5 million almost, and then add that on top of the damage that was already dealt and convert that into Isolytic, which is massive. And where the reason that this is so pronounced, I mean, a 1% net damage boost doesn't always sound great, but where it has such a pronounced impact on everything is because there is so little. Well, there isn't. Is the mitigation, because we haven't got 4 or 5 years worth of mitigation research and stuff like that that's going to actually affect it, and that's going to make the increase less impactful. Because there's so little that's going to actually affect the isolytic damage, it means it's going to be so much more pronounced than getting a 1% net increase of standard damage. You can see that they do differentiate the two on the battle logs, and they do that for every single battle log now. Right, so what we have done is we're going to talk about isolytic damage, and the crew that I've flown up there with, I've used obviously Pike and Ahura, because they obviously fit with my Pylum, and I've thrown Gorkon in there. So Gorkon has a chance to cause hull breach for 3 rounds when hitting with a critical hit. So, and I've used Gorkon on purpose instead of Lorca, just obviously to show that the ability turn on, rather than just been, because Lorca might have proc first round and we might never have seen him isolytic damage not be there. So the new artifact, which is obviously the only thing that I've got that is affecting isolytic damage, the blade of Takon. Isolytic damage while on an interceptor and the opponent has hull breach. Right, so that's not super clear though, is it? But if we know that now, we know that now. It never said that, did it? So
no, it didn't.
So the blade of Takon.
I agree that it's not the clearest description.
Yeah. So you are better with Lorca than Gorkon. I would probably agree. If it is the start of the round, I would probably say that Lorca could potentially be more potent. Obviously, I've just used this as a demonstration, and we are going to export this log. But where I was going with this was, it is a start of round check, so because we couldn't have had it in round 1, there is no way that Gorkon can get you any isolytic damage in round 1. First thing to consider, whereas Lorca can, because Lorca could potentially proc here. So I agree. We did get a Gorkon proc here, so we now have hull breach for at least the next 3 rounds. The battle is only for 3 rounds, which means that starting in round 2... What have I told you about doing that? That scared the crap out of me with sheep screams. We're going deep diving into ISO damage. Pack it in. So... starting in round 2, you doing that? See, I was on a bit of a roll then. I was on a roll there. So starting in round 2, every single shot now that we throw should now have isolytic damage. So, and again, we're getting hull breach left, right, and centre, because obviously it's a 90% chance. We've got Hugh on there throwing look. Stewie.
Wasn't me this time.
No, it wasn't you, it was Stewie this time. But yeah, so round 2 and round 3, every single shot now had isolytic damage. Now, isolytic damage, again, I mentioned this right at the start of the program. Program? Is that the right thing? Sure. Oh, you guys are taking the mick now. I might have to change that sheep scream to an actual bits redemption, and then at least I can get paid for you lot scaring the crap out of me. So the way that isolytic damage works is it takes, I mentioned this before. Thanks, Mimi. Very, very good. You should have saved it for a second, because I'm going to say, I'm going to drop a bombshell here. So what we thought happened, there was 2 schools of thought on how isolytic damage was calculated. We knew it was 1%, but we never knew whether it was, what is the total damage of the shot? So let's say it was 4.457 million, and do we take 1% off that damage and convert that into isolytic damage, and then it does its thing? Or do we take the standard damage and add whatever that is, 1%, and it goes on top of the standard damage, and it is the second one? So in theory, you're getting 1% based on my favour at the moment, which that Blade of Auton, or whatever it was called, that artifact that give me a 1% bonus. It's taking whatever the standard damage is, working out what 1% of it is, and then adding it on top. It is not calculating what 1% of the damage was and then converting that into isolytic damage. Does that make sense? So it is an addition rather than a conversion of damage. So that's really good news for us. Now, because hostiles, etc., they don't currently really have any forms of mitigation that we've got at the moment. I don't know if any of the new guys have got any mitigation ship abilities or anything like that with hostiles. There's nothing that I've seen. nobody can mitigate any of this. So this additional 1% is going directly, no mitigation. There's nothing for it to cut out from. It's still affected by the 80-20 split. It's still affected by the 80-20 split, or whatever split you've got. Like for example, if you're using Janeway, etc. But none of it is being mitigated. So it is going basically as net damage. So we've got a net increase and a net damage. Formadas have one ability that does the opposite of mitigation. So it increases penetration.
Actually, he's talking about the isolytic defense, where the formation armadas actually like decrease their own isolytic defense when you're using a specific ship against them.
So the ability of this is going to be specific to intercept function. At the start of the round. Yeah. Then this is going to be exactly the same, but for explorers or battleships. Yeah. So this one is going to be battleships. Got ya. That makes more sense. That makes more sense. It's big. But do you know what? I think the fact that they've put something in that's a little bit complicated, and that I understood isolytic damage, but I didn't understand isolytic defense and things like that. The fact they've put something in, it is quite complicated. At least it makes it something a little bit more interesting. Something that's not straight and linear. It's going to take a bit of playing with and a bit of testing and stuff like that. I think it could potentially add another layer to the game of interest.
It certainly adds another layer of complexity that is already to an already complex armada type.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I absolutely agree.
That's kind of what I'm getting from it.
So, because now you're going to have to be careful about which ships that you put in each one, especially when the rares and the epics come, that are potentially going to punch a lot harder. Right, so let's pull in our first ISO damage test into the BLT. The BLT is now working. Anybody that is not already in our Discord, you can get a link to the battle log tool. I am going to be running I'm going to be doing a YouTube video on exactly how to use it, but it is as easy as honestly guys, I've only just downloaded this brand new version in the last 5 minutes, and you've seen that it took me literally 5 or 6 clicks to be able to get a login there and been able to start using it. It's not complicated at all, but I am going to go through it and show people how to do it. So what Stewie has done, bloody legend, just to explain where this is. Damage now is overall damage, and the damage includes isolytic as well. So this is overall standard plus isolytic damage. So we can see it as a headline. How much has been mitigated? What your mitigation percentage is as a total. Obviously, this is technically your penetration. Shield damage, hull damage. So you can see it as an absolute overall. And then what he's done painstakingly is he has gone down and he's added in the isolytic damage lines. So they're in slightly different colours, they're in this like orangey colour. So you can see how many hits were isolytic. So we had 0 isolytic normal hits, but we actually had 7 critical hits. Because we was running at 92.86% criticals anyway, so we was expecting the majority of them to be there, and we've done 314,000 isolytic damage, which was 0.54% of the overall damage. Not bad. And it's exactly the same for obviously the Armada targets, but obviously the enemy, but obviously the enemies at the moment not throwing isolytic damage at us, so obviously they're all reading as 0. But being able to get this information in here, I think, is massive. He's fixed a round screen. Oh, we've removed the beta tag. If I just put me in there, yeah, there we go. Perfect, look at that. So because it had included myself and the hostile, I hadn't specified that I was just talking about me. We can see that it is exactly 1%. So the total isolytic damage for round 3 was 182,043. 182,0435. You can see it's exactly 1% of the total damage dealt. So we can see that it's working correctly, it's working how we wanted it to work. But I just think it's absolutely great. I think it's absolutely great what Stewie's been able to do to this. And if you haven't already, please check it out. We've looked at Isolytic Damage. Isolytic Damage, I think, is going to be a rolling theme. I think it's going to be something that we're going to be talking about for months. Really getting our head around it, especially how it all fits in with formation armadas.